Hello everyone, I am back on YouTube to talk to you about introverted intuition again. So what I'm going to talk about today is an example of how introverted intuition presents itself in writing, because I feel that big problem with studying cognitive functions online is that there are no real life examples of how they are used online. It's a lot of theory, it's a lot of written ideas that are just in writing, and no one really actually takes time to explain exactly how it presents itself in everyday life, and how it presents itself in like clips from movies or in just general everyday life or in writing or anything like that. I think that makes it very difficult to truly get a good grasp on how these 8 cognitive functions work, because we use them every single day and we're constantly using them, and if we can't identify them in our lives every day, it's much more difficult to attach understanding of this idea is attached to introverted intuition, and this idea is extroverted feeling. So that's what I'm going to try to do today. So the best way of identifying introverted intuition, I think, is by analyzing writing. Because it's so pattern-based, because it's so introverted, it has a very difficult time coming out verbally. But through writing, it is very easy for it to come out and for it to make itself known. So the following is a real-life example of how an introverted dominant writes. That's me. I wrote a monologue that was very introverted intuition heavy. So I will read that for you in just a second, so that you can see how introverted intuition works through writing, so that maybe you can identify it in your own writing, or say, maybe I'm not an introverted intuitive. Maybe I'm not an introverted intuitive myself, or maybe I am. So this is an example of how introverted intuition presents itself in writing. Time is not real. It is an illusion. Tomorrow is yesterday, and yesterday is tomorrow. Hours are not time, they are miles. Miles are not distance, they are time. Those in the past will never die, but those in the future will never live. And those in the present can't do either. For one can only be in one place at once. We have become what we were yesterday, void of who we are now, because of who we are tomorrow. Time is a book, paper upon which distance is written. It is all written, but is yet eternally malleable. And it all exists always, but can only be read 1 inch at once. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that little piece I wrote about time. So that was a monologue, but it was not a premeditated monologue. I didn't think about it before I wrote it. I didn't sit down for an hour or so and debate over in my head about these ideas, about what this means, what that means, how this idea is connected to that idea. I didn't consciously premeditate that. I didn't think about it. I wasn't thinking about it throughout the day. It just came out. I wasn't aware of where my thought process was taking me as I wrote it. When I first started out, I didn't really know how it was going to end. I didn't know where I was going logically. I didn't know where I was going intuitively. I just wrote and it came out. When I was done, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Who wrote that? Because introverted intuition is works subconsciously. I'll bring up my graphic again of the iceberg. Here it is. Introverted intuition does everything that it does subconsciously, all the way down here below the boundary of consciousness. I don't know if you watched my other video or not, the last one I published, where I described this diagram that describes introverted intuition. But essentially what I said was that introverted intuition works subconsciously, and it can be a metaphor that can describe it is a iceberg that only has a small part of it reach up into consciousness. but all of the work it's doing is subconscious. You don't think about it. So watch that video if you don't understand what I'm talking about. So because introverted intuition does everything it does subconsciously, only a small part of it comes above the boundary of consciousness. Most of what I wrote in that writing piece, I wasn't thinking about consciously throughout the day before I wrote that. It just came out. So when an introverted intuitive writes freely, without, not like in an email or when writing a technical paper or something like that, but when an introverted intuitive like an INTJ or an INFJ writes freely, we can, these little icebergs can pop up anywhere. There's so much generalization going on below the boundary of consciousness that all we need to really do from time to time is just wait for an iceberg to pop up somewhere. You don't know if there's a big, huge iceberg below it or if there's just a little bit. Sometimes it's a really big iceberg, sometimes it's not. But when it's a really big iceberg, you can come up with these really complex, intricate ideas that at first don't really make a lot of sense, but then when you complete the idea, it makes a lot of sense. By the time that you finish the writing and look back over it, it makes sense because it's supported by this huge triangle of ideas that you've been contemplating subconsciously for a very long time. So, the vast majority of what NI does happens subconsciously beneath the boundary of consciousness. So that was my example of introverted intuition in action. I'm going to try to keep making videos like these, and we'll probably focus on one INFJ cognitive function at a time, moving down the line. That's if I am able to continue making videos. As you can see, the video quality on this is probably really bad because this is a terrible camera and I have awful lighting and my nose might be clipping, I don't know. But it's the best I can do at the time. Here is the original that came right from the camera, so I did do a lot of work on this. Here I am back to make it look as good as I could despite the circumstances. So despite that, I will probably continue making videos as long as I'm able. But they won't be every day or anything like that. It'll take time for me to make them. I will probably focus on the 4 INFJ functions, cognitive functions, focus on one at a time, and I'll go from there. My final point, understanding all of the cognitive functions is very important, especially the cognitive functions that your own type uses. So if I have time, if I have the ability, if I have the equipment, which I probably won't, even if I don't have the equipment, I will probably at least try to make my own video about each of the cognitive functions and make a few videos of how they all connect together, how they're all interrelated. Because I know there's a bunch of stuff already out there, but I think everyone is able to contribute in some way. So hopefully I'm contributing to your knowledge. Probably not, though. That's okay. But maybe I'm helping somebody. So that's about all I have for this video. So I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I helped you with something. If you have comments, feel free to go below, and goodbye.